Guys, two questions. Sherrod, I'll start with you. And the first question is, how bad is this? The second question is, how in the world did they miss it? Doesn't matter because it is what it is. I'm just so perplexed about how you miss it. How did that happen?
It's not surprising, especially when you're talking about a guy who this injury is not new to him or to that damn knee of his, that specific knee. So it's not shocking that they missed it. It's a little bit disappointing, and maybe I think there may have been some hopeful optimism that it wasn't as bad as it looked. But we've been through this gauntlet enough to know that when guys get hurt and no one is around, it's usually a bad injury. It's usually the worst case scenario that you can think of, and certainly when you talk about Danilo, him having this type of injury at this point in his career is a very, very bad situation for him, for anyone, but particularly for him being an older player who is on the downside, of his career. But as far as the Celtics are concerned, to me, Danilo was going to be a luxury for them. He was a guy that was going to give them the potential to be comfortably in the conversation as one of the last teams standing. And I still think they're in that conversation. But the amount of cushion that they have in order to not be the best version of themselves and still win a championship, that cushion is shrunk because he addresses a very specific need that we saw play out in the playoffs last year, particularly against Golden State, and that is their inability to have a stretch big come off the bench and can knock down shots. And we know the numbers. I mean, he's been near 40% three-point shooter throughout the bulk of his career. And not having a veteran player with that type of DNA, with that type of track record available all season long, you're going to have to look for some other sources of offense from that particular spot, particularly when you're talking about a second unit that was ranked 26th in the NBA in scoring as a group. So his absence is going to be felt before he even played a game, no question.
Yeah.
Bobby? I started to get excited about seeing him, especially when you looked at some of the numbers, playing off Trae Young, catch and shoot. He was still an elite player in that sense, and he could pretty much hit from everywhere on the floor. You looked at his career and just all the different shooting charts and everything else, and anywhere he shot on the floor, he was pretty capable from, particularly the right side last year. He was just killing it. And that was a dynamic that the Celtics, outside of Grant Williams last year, haven't had in recent memory. You would have loved the idea of Jason Tatum in a crowd being able to fire off to this guy, and his wide open percentages last year, I think we're up near 42%. So even though he's declined in certain areas, didn't fit this team ideally as a defensive piece. I didn't love the signing initially because I thought there were some better options who fit in more versatile, especially on the defensive end. But once I saw the offensive output, even in his maybe worst year since his rookie year, I started to get excited about seeing him. And the fact that we won't even see it now, it seems like, is really disappointing. You mentioned him as a luxury, Sherrod. I feel like they were relying on him a little bit. I mean, Neesmith's gone, so you have no backup wings. They had talked about him as kind of a backup five in certain lineups, and now it's just my guy Cornette, who I have high hopes for, but maybe not night in, night out. They're going to have to replace him, I think.
Yeah.
Unless they want to do that tight rotation, 7 men, 38 minutes a night for Tatum and 35 for Brown, and Horford's playing 30 minutes a night. I don't think you want to do that for another year, but that's the position you're in right now.
No, the reason why I referred to him as a luxury, Bobby, had more to do with the fact that the Celtics without him are a title contender. Without him at all. With him, there's a little bit more cushion in terms of their title hopes. And again, I think that cushion is shrunk, which in my mind, that makes him somewhat of a luxury because your goal is still very attainable without him. It's just that you don't have nearly as much margin for error now to get there as you would have had you had a 6'10" veteran, stretch big on your roster.
That's the thing. And again, to address two things. One, not Bobby's criticism, the criticism of Gallinari not being a perfect fit here. That's what you get for $6 million. I feel like it's the Dennis Schroeder conversation all over again. Not that we're not going to compare it, but you get a flawed player who's left there when all the free agency dust has settled because they're not perfect. If he could play D, he'd be making, even at his age, he'd be making $15, $18 million a year. So that's what you got. but it was a good fit because it was a guy who wanted to be here, who did have a particular set of skills that was extremely useful and addressed an area of need. And I think you were going to find a way to hide some of the things he can't do and really, really, really benefit. As you said, he's 40% from three all day. Like that's just what he does. He's just knocks. It's consistent. You can count on it. You don't have to worry about, oh, well, he's, can this guy knock it down enough? So you're kind of stuck in the same place and running in place. What I will say to people who will say, it's not that big a deal, they can get by it and this and that. Look, if you were excited he was here, you've got to be equally disappointed that he's not going to be here because you knew you had very little to work with, if you were Brad in the offseason. He swung big and he hit with Brogdon there, which really addressed an area of need, but you needed front court depth and wing depth to be able to spell, some of the guys there. And now you don't have it. And so is it gloom and doom? And are they going to fall to the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference? Maybe. No, I don't think so. But that's not the point.
What the hell are you talking about?
I'm kidding. But you're talking about a team that you really felt good about because you thought, given what they had to work with, they maximized this roster. Now you're going to look back and say, well, Wick, maybe you could have spent some TPE dollars here because that's gone. Your outlets now, and again, your outlets are small, like the amount, what you can do. You've got half of Gallinari's $6 million to play with. So you got $3 million to go and try to find somebody. Yeah, there's a couple of spare parts laying around. I know Montrez there. Harrell is one who's got his own set of issues, but obviously could address front court depth there. Got to figure out what that situation is. Melo has been kicked around, but it hurts. And I don't know where you find it unless you start to look at your roster and say, can I move something to address an area of need? And will that even make me better because you are relatively thin right now?